Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to my channel. In this episode of Wonky Wednesday we're going to make a disappearing Ninepatch. So in order to do that we need to start with a Ninepatch and then we're going to make it disappear and magically reappear as four patches that we can then play with. So I've made a start because it's quite a lot of piecing. So I've made 2 rows of my Ninepatch and joined them together. And then I've joined 2 other bits, and I'm going to just join this bit in case anybody's new to piecing, just to show you what I do. Now the important thing when choosing your cloth is to have something really striking in the middle, because the middle square is going to end up cut into 4. So I've gone with this dark purple, and then I've gone with cream and brown for the outside squares. So you need 4 squares each of your outside squares and 1 square for the middle. And my squares are around 2.5 inches, I think, just checking. Yes, 2.5 inches square. I wouldn't go much smaller than that because, like I say, this little chap's going to get cut that way and that way. So it's going to end up to quite a tiny square. But of course, you know, you go for it if you feel like doing miniatures, if you're inspired by Amy Pabst last week and her micro piecing. But anyway, get on with it, Catherine, stop wittering. So, as in the wonky checkerboard a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to do the locking back stitch. Now, the only real place you need to do it is everywhere that you join to the centre square, because that's where we're going to cut. But I'll do it here just to show you in case you don't know or you need a reminder. So I'm putting my squares right sides together. You can pin if you like. And I've just got normal piecing cotton and a fine needle, because this is quite high thread count cotton, although it is beautiful. And I've got a knot and I do a back stitch to start, and then I go just a normal running stitch, as small as I can, and then I go back slightly, just behind where I came out, and then I go forward for 1 and 2, and I do that all the way along, so a tiny back stitch and then forward for 2. Probably would have been easier if I'd shown you on the other side where it's lighter coloured and you would have seen the thread. I'll show you when I join this to the other one and then you'll see it on the cream. And I've got a knot in the thread. So it's a little back stitch and then 2 forward stitches. Little back stitch, 2 forward stitches. And my seam, I don't know if I mentioned it, is somewhere in the region of 1/4 inch, but we're wonky so we're not worrying too much. But as always, if you want to measure and draw yourself a guideline to stitch along, that makes you happy, then you go for it. So I'm just going to do a couple of little back stitches to end off. And snip. And then I'm going to join this one onto there to complete my Ninepatch. Now I'm going to do some pinning now. You don't have to if you just want to sew them together and see how they end up, but I can't help myself apparently. So I'm going to only pin where the seams meet. So I'm just going to make sure that my 2 seam allowances go in opposite directions. I hope you can see that. And then you can kind of lock them up together. Do you see? And then I'll just put a little pin through there. Should really have bigger pins, but I haven't got any here, so. And then the same at the other side. And there, because it's cloth and you know it's forgiving and it stretches and you can smoosh it up a bit, you should be able to match your points if you want to. If you're not worried, then don't worry. So now I'm just going to sew along that seam in exactly the same way. Now if I really found it tedious doing the locking back stitch, I need only do it here where I'm joining to the middle square. I could just do plain running stitch either side, because those stitches won't be cut through. But a lot of the time when I'm piecing, I just do the locking back stitch anyway. That's, you know, I don't mind it. I quite like the rhythm of it. And I'd rather just do that all the way along than worry about where I should and shouldn't be doing it. So a little stitch back and 2 stitches forward. Back and 2 forward. All the way up to the seam allowances. And because I want this to lay nice and flat, I'm not going to stitch through the seam allowances. I'll show you if you haven't seen that before. That just means that then when you come to press it, whether that be with your fingers or with an iron, you can make the seam allowances go whichever way you want them to. So I'm coming up to the seam, I'm going to pinch it between my thumb and forefinger and get the pin out. And then I'm going to push this seam on the top back the other way and hold it between my thumb and finger. And I'm going to carry on with my locking back stitch right up until I meet the stitching line coming the other way. I'm going to take an extra back stitch there just to secure the seam junction. And then I'm going to take my needle, let the seam pop up and come right through the base of the seam and out the other side. Do you see that? And then I can let the seam on the back go that way, out of my way, and pinch it. And then on I go stitching again. So back 1, forward 2. And then I can let all those seam allowances go. I can sort them out later when I come to press them. Oh, I didn't go back. Back 1, forward 2. All that business with the seams, you know, that's just if it worries you, if you want to be accurate. I don't think there's any right or wrong. It's just what you like to do and what makes you happy in your finished piece. For me it's a habit because I've done a lot of hand piecing over the years. Whoops, the pin out was a bit close. So push the seam away, I need another running stitch forward and then a back stitch. There's certainly no rules. Are they rules? I don't know. They're guidelines. They're guidelines, but there's just one way of doing it. I don't like talking about the right way and the wrong way. Because I think it's whatever makes you happy in the doing of it. That for me is always the most important thing, that I enjoy the making. To me, that's more important than how the finished thing looks. And I know not everybody's the same. Oops. Some people get upset if they're not happy with the look of the finished piece, so they want to be as accurate as they can. And personally, I actually like wonky. I think there's much more character to it. You might have noticed if you've been here a while that I like wonky. It's not just an excuse for not being, exact or whatever. I just actually think there's much more character to it. But again, that's just personal opinion. Okay, so that's the end of that seam. I'll do a couple of back stitches just to end off my thread. And snip. Now, a sensible person would take that to the ironing board. But you all know, if you've been here a while, that I'm not a sensible person when it comes to ironing. So I'm just going to finger press it. You could, if you wanted to, do that 4-patch finger pressing in these, because this in principle now is a 4-patch here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you know when you press all the seams going in the same direction, like that. and then the middle of where they all meet will squash down and make that little cute 4-patch thing that I've talked about before. It also means that those seams are as flat as they ever can be. Do you see that rather wonky little 4-patch in the middle? So you could do that if you wanted to, but you know, I'm not going to fiddle about. I'm just going to make it lie flat for now, ish. Now we're going to make 2 cuts, one through here and one through here. Now if you've got all that rotary cutting rulers and all that, you can do that. You can quite easily measure with your ruler your halfway mark. I have got that stuff, but I'm going to do it with scissors and a pencil and a normal ruler, just for those of you that don't have all the stuff. So I've just got a normal pencil, a normal ruler sorry it's a bit glary. I'm just going to make a little mark halfway my square, which will be at 1 inch now because my squares are now 2 inches wide. If you don't even want to make the mark, if you just want to cut, that's also absolutely fine. So I'm just making little tick marks right on the edge. They'll be, you know, cut through in a minute. Whoops, sorry about the clanking. And the last one's going there. And I'm going to do the cutting trick that I was taught by a tailor, a retired tailor who used to come on workshops of mine. So I'm going to start cutting at this tick mark here. Hope I'm in frame. And my eye is now on that tick mark there. I'm trusting my hands to do what they should be doing, and I'm just cutting straight on to that tick mark, and I'm arriving there in vaguely a straight line. That's quite scary, cutting through your work. And I'm going to turn it, and now of course my tick marks aren't there anymore because I've cut it in half. So I'm just going to put it back in place, and I'm just going to get that tick mark under the scissors. And I'm actually not looking at the other tick mark, it's such a short length. I'm just cutting it straight through. If you want to measure and make new tick marks, you go for it. The scissors are not the best. So now I've got these 4 little units. Aren't they cute? Can you see them? And now you can play with these, and especially if you make lots of them to make a bigger piece, you can play with them nearly endlessly, I think. So you could turn them all through 90 degrees in one direction, you know, in the same direction. Turn, turn. I turn them all a quarter turn clockwise. And then you have that. You turn them another quarter turn clockwise, you'll get this. You could just turn 2 of them on opposite diagonals. You can turn these 2 like that. You can just play and play for hours until you decide which layout you like. I think I had pre-decided, put it back how it was, to just turn these 2 like that. I think that's what I decided. Really is, it's almost endless. I think it maybe even is endless if you've got a lot of them. So there. So I'm going to sew them back together like that, otherwise I'll be here literally for hours playing. So I'm just going to pick these, I'm going to leave them laid out how I want them. So I'm going to pick up these top 2 and put them right sides together. And I am going to pin them now just because they're slightly bigger. And you see you don't have to match up any seam allowances anymore because they're all offset. This one's sewn to a straight bit of cloth, and so is that. If you're cutting slightly off, you can just, you know, adjust. Get it somewhere in the middle. If you've got one piece, you see there, that's slightly smaller. I don't mind, we're wonky. And then I'm just going to stitch that together, and now you can just do a normal running stitch because there's no more cutting. And we'll start with the back stitch because this thread's quite fine and it's inclined to pull through, just with a knot. And I'll try and find some links, but there are so many I probably won't be able to find a comprehensive one. But if you Google disappearing Ninepatch layouts, you'll find a lot of them. But I think the most fun thing to do is just make yourself some 9 patches. You could even do it scrappy, you know, you could just go with a theme. You could maybe have the centre squares all the same colour and just choose lights and darks for the outside squares, or you know, whatever. Scrappy. They don't have to be all the same, all the squares don't have to be all the same colour. And you can think about when you're choosing, like I said, that you've got a contrast for the... I'm just stitching through my seam allowances because I'm feeling rebellious and they don't have to move anymore. You'll notice that the middle square gets cut into 4. The 4 inner squares around the outside, you know, the ones that aren't the corners, whatever you call them, get cut into rectangles. But the 4 outside corner squares stay intact. So if you had large prints or, you know, some kind of motif in your cloth that you wanted to feature, then you would put them in the corner squares, because those don't get cut. So that's something to think about. Right, so that's that one like that. To decide which way to put the seam. Let's put it that way. I'll probably then go and baste all those seams afterwards, like I did in the checkerboard. I think I need a new bit of thread. Excuse my arm coming across. But you can see that, I hope you can see the possibilities. My thread's going to run across the desk. It's just yet another use for the wonderful Ninepatch, which is one of my favourites. And you could combine it with, you know, any other kind of patches you liked, but certainly you could combine it with 9 patches that you hadn't disappeared, you know. So I could have left some the same and done some like this and combined them all, and just think it's a lovely thing. I used to make it a lot when I did a lot of machine piecing, you know, making quilts by sewing machine. And of course you can do that as well if you like using a sewing machine. Where's my needle now? Can't actually see because the light is shining on it. There we go. So I'm going to join these 2 pieces together, and then I'm going to join this piece to that piece, and then I'll be back again. Okay, so that's all joined together, and I also went round, like in the checkerboard week, and basted down all the seams using the invisible baste. That basting down of seams is a technique I learned from Jude Hill many years ago, and I just love it because it makes the cloth feel like one cloth. I wish there was feel-o-vision, but if you do it yourself, many of you have reported doing it yourselves and agreeing with me how wonderful it then feels. You'll also see that here I had a seam that I'd basted one way and then I started basting the other way, so it's got a twist in it, but I just smooshed it down as best I could, and once I stitch on it it'll be absolutely fine. So it's too big to fit in my journal. Here's my journal that I've been putting some of my weekly pieces in. Well, it would just fit, but you know. But I like it so much, I'm going to keep it. Well, not that putting it in my journal wouldn't be keeping it. I mean, I keep a box or a basket of odd pieces that I've made, experimental pieces, you know, samples that I've stitched, or pieces that didn't find their way into the project they're intended for. And then every now and then I go through that and I get those pieces out, and sometimes they provide a jumping off point for a whole project of their own, or other times they're just the thing to include in another piece. Sometimes you can put 4 together and make a rice bag. Sorry. So, you know, it's there's no waste, there's no harm in just making something just because you wanted to make a disappearing Ninepatch block, and then keeping it in a basket, and one day it'll find its home in something. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you have a go at this. It's one of those things that's super simple to make, but looks like you're really clever, I think, when you look at the finished result. So if that's important to you, you know. But anyway, it's a lovely graphic surface, and thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more Cloth Tales. Bye bye.